Hello everybody, my name is Rachel and welcome to my weekly wrap-up of October 2nd, 2016, wherein, as usual, I tell you about what I read last week. This is going to be perhaps a sluggish wrap-up, not very deep, because I'm falling asleep. I have been so tired and out of it all day. It's very gray and kind of chilly outside and I just want to take a nap. But I want to film this first, so forgive me for this. I read 5 things this past week, and the first one that I'm not going to talk about here but will be in my next video is Startide Rising by David Brin. This is the last of the joint winners of the Hugo and Nebula Awards that I had to read, and it's a science fiction novel. I guess you could call it a hard science fiction novel from the 80s. This is the second book in the Uplift saga by Brin, and I haven't read the first book, but I understood it completely fine. I think it doesn't have much to do with the previous book. I'm not exactly sure. I also buddy read this with Amanda from A Scientist Reads. It was fun to talk to her about this, and I think we agreed on the parts we didn't like very much. But once again, I will talk about this in more detail in my September wrap-up of Hugo and Nebula award winners that I read. I also read Crosstalk by Connie Willis. This is her new science fiction romantic comedy about telepathy, basically. I was really attracted to it because I've enjoyed Connie Willis's stuff in the past, and intriguingly enough, unlike previous works, this isn't about lack of communication because communication is impossible, but how over-communication and over-connectedness means you will never communicate anything. It's a very funny situation. I think this is like satire in some way, but I still had problems with this. I wrote an entire review going into some detail on this that I'll link down below. I guess the gist of it is I didn't think it was funny because I was so stressed out. I was actually anxious reading about how the main character, Brittany, is her privacy and her consent are constantly violated by everybody, including her family, who won't leave her alone. She has an awful boyfriend who wants her to get a minor surgery so they can emotionally feel each other. And there's no good reason for her to do this, but she wants to do it anyway. And then there's the tech guy at the corporation she works at with her boyfriend who immediately warns her she shouldn't get this operation, she shouldn't get an EED, and she does it anyway. And then we come to the pros and cons of telepathy. But it couldn't be funny to me because I was so stressed out by all the rude behavior that just, I have social anxiety, and that's probably why. I didn't think it was very romantic either because the whole situation and what happens between Brittany and CB and other characters, I was just like, you need to be nicer to each other and communicate or something. The ultimate problem with this is that Brittany has no backbone. She is a complete doormat. She has no agency, she does nothing on her own. At certain points in the story, she actually has somebody else put words in her mouth because she can't come up with what to say. That's a problem. On the other hand, this reminded me so much of other work that I have really enjoyed by Connie Willis. The psychics, the trivia, the corporate culture parody and everything. All of these things I like so much. But this is also kind of problematic because if it constantly reminds me of other, perhaps better things that she's done, then why does this exist? Is it just mimicking things she's done in the past, or is it something actually new? I don't know. For the most part, I enjoyed reading the book. I read it in 2 days, and it's a 500-page book. Like, I really wanted to know what was going to happen and what the resolutions would be, but at the end, I was a little unhappy. Something that did make me happy is Words Are My Matter by Ursula K. Le Guin, a collection of writings about life and books from 2000 to 2016. And you know me, I'm a huge Ursula K. Le Guin fan, so I am primed, biased in all ways to enjoy everything I pick up by her, and this was not an exception. So the table of contents for this is in roughly 4 sections: talks, essays, and occasional pieces, book introductions and notes on writers, book reviews, and then a journal of a writer's week, which is a week she spent at a writer's retreat in the 90s. My favorite part of this was actually the book reviews and the introductions, because I didn't know that Guin wrote book reviews, and that was just really cool to read. I also now feel like I will never write a good book review in my life. But she covers a variety of things, books that I have read and loved, books that I want to read, things I've never even heard of, and some things that I have heard of but wouldn't have considered reading until she talked about them. And she's so eloquent. She's a beautiful stylist, which is why when you're reading Guin and then you're reading something that isn't written so beautifully, you notice it. I'm totally talking about Startide Rising right now. Anyway, I really enjoyed this, and I would definitely recommend it to people who enjoy Guin and her critical commentary on genre fiction. I listened to the audiobook of But What If We're Wrong, Thinking About the Present as If It Were the Past by Chuck Klosterman. I picked this audiobook up without looking closely at what it was actually analyzing. The question at the heart of the book is an interesting one. It asks, what will really be remembered about our culture today in the far future? What will be like the one author we remember from 21st century American writing? What will be the rock musician we remember in the future? Things like that. I thought this book was going to cover maybe weightier topics, things that we actually had gotten wrong about our world today, about science, technology, theories and such, and it's not. It is literally about the arts and pop culture and what might be remembered in the future. And I wasn't that impressed. Partly because I am not that interested in pop culture. This is about music, TV shows, movies, sports, and I have no interest in this. I think the weakness, the flaw at the heart of this premise is that Klosterman himself ends up arguing in a way that the answer to these questions doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to us today, and it has no effect on us what people will remember about us 300, 500 years in the future. And in the future, it will not matter to those people what they view the past as either. Especially when you're talking about TV shows. Some people who are just really interested in these areas, probably it does matter to them, but even when he was talking about books and authors and stuff, which I do care quite a bit about, I was still sitting here thinking, it doesn't matter, I'm gonna be dead. He only briefly dives into science. He kind of talks about gravity and multiverse theories, and he interviewed Neil deGrasse Tyson and Brian Greene for this, but I already knew everything about what they had to say because I've read their books. And then he explicitly tells you that he's skipping over climate change because even though everybody was expecting him to write about it, he didn't want to get super tangled up in that. So that's what I wanted him to talk about. That's what I think would have been more interesting and worth my time to read, but it didn't turn out to be about that. The last thing that I finished was Giant Days Volume 2. This is written by John Allison and illustrated by Lissa Treiman and Max Sarin. It's a slice of life comic about three fast friends in college and their trials and travails and friendship, basically. I love this. I think it is adorable and funny enough that I laughed out loud while reading it. And when I got to the last page, I said, why don't I have volume 3 yet? It's just so enjoyable. I love all three of the main characters. There are 2 male characters in this as well that I really like seeing both of them. This is absolutely like Lumberjanes in college for adults. I'm gonna stick with that description. That's what I read this past week. Lots of good stuff that made me think quite a bit. I wish I'd done it justice in this video, but I really want a nap. If I film another video after this, the next thing you'll be seeing then is my Hugo and Nebula Award winners wrap up for September, all 3 of them. It was pretty good for the end of September. So I hope you're having a slightly less sleepy weekend than I am and getting things done, and I will talk to you again in my next video. Bye. My hair is gonna look fantastic for about 5 minutes, and by the end of this video, it'll be a mess, even though I'm not moving at all.